He sent a breakup text while I was helping a customer pick out a scarf and thought he had won. 12 years of marriage ended with a cruel message, our joint account drained, and my husband gleefully off to Miami with his 20-year-old girlfriend. But what he didn't know was that I, the abandoned wife, had been quietly preparing for this moment all along. He sent a breakup text while I was helping a customer pick out a scarf and thought he had won. 12 years of marriage ended with a cruel message, our joint account drained, and my husband gleefully off to Miami with his 20-year-old girlfriend. But what he didn't know was that I, the abandoned wife, had been quietly preparing for this moment all along. You see, betrayal doesn't always arrive with dramatic confrontations or slammed doors. Sometimes it slips quietly into your life through late nights at the office that don't match the paycheck new colognes that aren't for you or phones that suddenly need passwords. I noticed them all. Mark had been changing and not subtly. He began hitting the gym religiously, updating his wardrobe to clothes too young for his 45-year-old frame, and using slang that sounded ridiculous coming from someone who used to correct my grammar. There were mysterious receipts from expensive dinners when he claimed to be working late, and a smugness in his attitude that spoke louder than any confession. He thought I didn't notice. He thought I was too caught up in my little shop to pay attention. But I noticed, and I planned. 3 months before his grand betrayal, I found a receipt for a hotel stay. That same night, I opened a new bank account under my name and moved most of my savings there. When he suggested combining our finances to simplify things, I smiled sweetly and made sure the joint account had just enough to avoid suspicion. Everything else safely tucked away. While he fantasized about his new life, I documented everything suspicious: charges, text messages, financial patterns. I even consulted a lawyer, quietly, calmly, strategically. So when that text message arrived, I'm leaving you and moving to Miami with my 20-year-old girlfriend. I've already emptied our joint account. Ha ha ha. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply finished helping a customer choose a scarf, locked up the boutique, and sent back a 2-word reply: good luck. What Mark didn't realize is that betrayal doesn't break a prepared woman, it activates her. He thought that message was the end of our story. He had no idea. It was just the beginning. Mark thought he'd delivered the final blow: a text message, a drained bank account, and a smug escape with his barely legal girlfriend. But what he didn't realize was this: I had already made my move. As he booked 2 first-class tickets to Miami using our joint credit card, I was already 1 step ahead, sipping wine and reviewing my case file with my lawyer. The hotel charges the duplicate restaurant bills, the sudden transfers, all of it carefully compiled in a folder labeled just in case. And now the case had arrived. You don't survive betrayal by reacting. You survive by being ready. 2 months before his dramatic text, I'd sat in my lawyer's office with trembling hands and burning questions. What happens if he leaves? What if he tries to take everything I had asked? My lawyer, a calm and razor-sharp woman named Rebecca, had smiled knowingly. Then we'll already be 10 steps ahead, and we were. The boutique, my so-called little shop, was incorporated in my name only. Its profits were never tied to our joint finances. Mark had always mocked my spreadsheets, called me obsessive for tracking every receipt and invoice. But it was those very habits that would now become my shield. That night, after locking the shop, I returned my home, the house I'd inherited from my grandmother, which I'd wisely kept under my name, despite Mark's repeated suggestions to make it ours. Another red flag I'd realized in hindsight. He hadn't wanted to share a home. He wanted to claim it. While he toasted cocktails with Melissa in his head, I was printing out bank statements, organizing files, and setting the wheels in motion. He was playing checkers. I was playing chess. The next morning, as he confidently texted, "Don't bother begging. Melissa and I leave tomorrow. I'll send for my things later." I was already on the phone with the credit card company, reporting fraudulent charges. "Yes, ma'am," the representative said after I forwarded Mark's self-incriminating texts. "We'll cancel those bookings and block further use." Let him arrive at the airport, bags in hand, girlfriend in tow, only to find his grand romantic escape canceled. He even had the audacity to text, "Don't worry about the house. I'll let you stay until you find something smaller." I laughed an actual laugh. The house was mine, legally, fully, irrevocably. Then came the insult cherry on the betrayal cake. "I know the shop means a lot to you. We can work out a fair split." My shop. The business I had built from the ground up, while he rolled his eyes at my long hours. He truly believed he was entitled to half of it just because he'd been standing nearby while I built it. But here's the thing: proximity isn't participation, and entitlement isn't ownership. While he gloated, I prepared. While he schemed, I secured. And while he thought he'd taken everything from me, I was already taking back everything he thought he'd stolen. Let him think he'd won. Monday was coming. So was the truth. Monday arrived. So did justice. Mark walked into the courthouse in a blazer 2 sizes too tight. Clearly part of his desperate attempt to look younger, cooler, and in control. But control had long since slipped from his fingers. Right around the time he thought a 20-year-old receptionist was a life upgrade. Melissa didn't even come inside. She waited outside on a bench, scrolling through her phone while I sat beside my lawyer in calm silence. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even nervous. I was ready. The hearing was swift, almost surgical. My lawyer laid out everything: the hotel bills, the misused joint funds, the messages, with his own gloating admissions. When Mark's attorney tried to paint me as vindictive, Rebecca replied, "You mean prepared." The judge, a sharp-eyed woman who'd clearly seen every type of marital drama in her courtroom, didn't need much convincing. "Mr. Harrison," she said evenly, "you emptied the joint account, committed credit card fraud, and now claim rights to property that has been proven separate." Mark stuttered something about emotional support and shared dreams. The judge raised an eyebrow. Support does not equal ownership. Within 20 minutes it was over. My house was declared separate property, my business too. All joint assets were frozen. Mark was ordered to return the money he'd stolen within 24 hours. As we stepped out of the courthouse, I heard Melissa whisper, "So, where are we going now?" His silence was the only answer I needed. From that day forward, our lives went in opposite directions and fast. While Mark spiraled, I soared. My boutique, once dismissed by him as a little shop, became a quiet sensation. Word spread quickly, not just about the clothes, but about the story. Women came in just to say, "We heard what happened. We support you." Some bought scarves, others spent thousands, but all of them left with admiration and inspiration. I hired more staff, launched an online store, and even opened a second location within 6 months. My inbox began filling with press requests, mentorship inquiries, and invitations to speak at business events. Apparently, being the woman who bounced back beautifully was something people wanted to hear about. Meanwhile, Mark's world unraveled. He tried to use his personal credit cards all maxed out. Tried to charm hotel staff into rebooking their Miami escape, all declined. Eventually, he and Melissa ended up in a dingy motel near the airport. Not quite the palm trees and mojitos he'd imagined. He called his family trying to spin the story. But I had already sent his mother screenshots of the texts, the mocking one about my age, the haha, after draining our account. They stopped defending him. Even his sister Amanda began telling mutual friends. We had no idea. We thought he was the victim. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't need a megaphone. It just needs time. While he lived in shame and borrowed space, I lived in freedom, surrounded by growth progress and real empowerment. He lost everything. I found myself. It's funny how quickly people switch sides once the truth comes out. When Mark first made his move, the text message, the girlfriend, the drained account, his version of the story spread like wildfire. According to him, I was cold, controlling, obsessed with my boutique. He painted himself as a man, seeking freedom from a loveless marriage, not someone committing financial fraud, while romancing a girl young enough to call him uncle. At first, his family rallied behind him. His mother called me voice, dripping with polite disappointment. Claire, dear, Mark says you're being difficult, that you're making trouble for his travel plans. He says you've changed. I put her on speaker while I arranged a window display. Barbara, I said calmly, did he mention emptying our joint account and using our shared credit card to fly his girlfriend to Miami? There was silence. No how about the text where he mocked my age and called my business a hobby? Another pause. Well, he did seem a bit harsh, she finally muttered. That was the last real conversation we had. The more people saw the actual evidence, the texts, the charges, the smug admissions, the more the narrative unraveled. His version of events started to look like what it really was. A desperate man's fantasy escape, funded by deception and entitlement. His sister Amanda was next. I hadn't expected to see her walk into my boutique, but one Thursday afternoon, there she was awkwardly browsing the silk scarves. I came to apologize, she said, not meeting my eyes. We believed him. He said you were distant, controlling. He made it sound like he had no choice. And now I asked, she sighed. Now I've seen the messages, the bragging, the way he talked about taking your money. It's not who I thought he was. I nodded, not out of anger, but clarity. It never is until it is. Word spread beyond family. My story, once whispered among neighbors and clients, turned into something else: empowerment. Local women came in just to shake my hand. Some brought their daughters. You showed us what being prepared looks like, one said. What not backing down looks like. And Mark, his support system crumbled. Melissa left him after 2 weeks of sharing her tiny apartment with a bitter man who couldn't pay for dinner. She removed her relationship status and posted cryptic quotes about learning the hard way. His friends stopped inviting him out. His coworkers whispered behind his back. Even his mother eventually left a voicemail, no longer defending but broken. I raised him better than this, she said through tears. I'm so sorry, Claire. But the time for apologies had passed. I had no space left in my life for people who only showed up when the ship was already sinking. Because while they were discovering who Mark really was, I had already discovered who I truly was. Not the victim of betrayal, not the bitter ex-wife, but the woman who outgrew every lie and turned it into fuel. They say success is the best revenge, but for me, it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about freedom. About walking through my boutique, now expanded to 3 thriving locations, and seeing the shelves lined with pieces I had curated, brands I had partnered with, employees I had trained. It was about watching women leave my store a little taller, a little stronger, just by hearing my story. Mark, on the other hand, was living a different narrative. After Melissa left him, his life became a string of bad decisions. He moved back into his parents' house, into his childhood bedroom, with football posters still on the wall, and tried to salvage the ruins of his reputation. He filed petition after petition, trying to claim a piece of the business he never lifted a finger for. My lawyer shut them down one by one. He even said his "ha-ha" in the text proved he was joking, she told me once, laughing. The judge asked if laughter made fraud legal. He tried dating apps women weren't impressed. Tried new jobs employers weren't buying his excuses. Every door he tried to open was already closed, and rightly so. Meanwhile, I was getting invited to speak at business conferences, not to talk about the divorce, but to talk about resilience preparation and the importance of keeping personal and business finances separate. "You're so inspiring," a young woman told me after a panel. "My boyfriend says I'm being paranoid for wanting to keep a separate account. But after hearing you, I realize I'm just being smart." "Protection isn't paranoia," I replied, smiling. "It's wisdom." At my 5-year boutique anniversary, I stood in front of a crowd of employees, customers, and partners. My business now had 5 locations, 30 employees, and a waiting list of investors. I looked out and didn't see tragedy. I saw triumph. Mark's mother showed up that day, dressed in one of our newest collections. She waited until the room emptied out before approaching me. "I saw him yesterday," she said quietly, still talking about his glory days, still blaming everyone else. "But we're done making excuses for him. He didn't lose everything in the divorce, Claire. He threw it away." I nodded. I didn't need her to say it, I already knew. And I had stopped needing validation from anyone but myself a long time ago. The last thing I see before leaving my office every day is a framed screenshot of Mark's first cruel message, "Have fun with your little shop. At least it'll keep you busy in your old age." Below it hangs my latest award, Top Female Entrepreneur of the Year. That text was supposed to be the end of my story, but it became my beginning, and now every time someone underestimates me, I just smile, because they have no idea what's coming. He sent a breakup text while I was helping a customer pick out a scarf and thought he had won. 12 years of marriage ended with a cruel message, our joint account drained, and my husband gleefully off to Miami with his 20-year-old girlfriend. But what he didn't know was that I, the abandoned wife, had been quietly preparing for this moment all along. He sent a breakup text while I was helping a customer pick out a scarf and thought he had won. 12 years of marriage ended with a cruel message, our joint account drained, and my husband gleefully off to Miami with his 20-year-old girlfriend. But what he didn't know was that I, the abandoned wife, had been quietly preparing for this moment all along. You see, betrayal doesn't always arrive with dramatic confrontations or slammed doors. Sometimes it slips quietly into your life through late nights at the office that don't match the paycheck, new colognes that aren't for you, or phones that suddenly need passwords. I noticed them all. Mark had been changing, and not subtly. He began hitting the gym religiously, updating his wardrobe to clothes too young for his 45-year-old frame, and using slang that sounded ridiculous coming from someone who used to correct my grammar. There were mysterious receipts from expensive dinners when he claimed to be working late, and a smugness in his attitude that spoke louder than any confession. He thought I didn't notice. He thought I was too caught up in my little shop to pay attention. But I noticed, and I planned. 3 months before his grand betrayal, I found a receipt for a hotel stay. That same night, I opened a new bank account under my name and moved most of my savings there. When he suggested combining our finances to simplify things, I smiled sweetly and made sure the joint account had just enough to avoid suspicion. Everything else safely tucked away. While he fantasized about his new life, I documented everything suspicious: charges, text messages, financial patterns. I even consulted a lawyer, quietly, calmly, strategically. So when that text message arrived, "I'm leaving you and moving to Miami with my 20-year-old girlfriend. I've already emptied our joint account." Ha ha ha. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply finished helping a customer choose a scarf, locked up the boutique, and sent back a 2-word reply: "Good luck." What Mark didn't realize is that betrayal doesn't break a prepared woman, it activates her. He thought that message was the end of our story. He had no